you know.
Yep, we'll see how many people are showing up as attendees and see if any of the CAC members need to get brought over. So folks on the line, we are giving it a few minutes to get a few other members of the CAC on board to see if we have a quorum. We'll give it a few minutes. There's Monica. So that's our quorum, right? We need 4. Adrian?
5? I mean, well.
We have 5. We need 4 for a quorum, right? No, we have 6. We have 6. So I think we have to have 4 for a quorum. So Jane should be coming, and hopefully Ernie. Those are our other 2. So because
Jane has just requested that I send her a link. Hold on 1 second.
I thought I was early. Are you trying to imply that I'm late?
No, I think you were right on time.
Oh,
It's 6:01 on my clock.
My clock says 5:59 on it.
Oh, I don't know what the atomic clock is.
I know. Maybe it's
okay, yeah, Jane didn't have the meeting link. You just sent it to her, so she should be showing up. Okay. We'll give her a second, and then when Jane joins, we'll officially start the meeting.
Hey folks, I'm just testing my audio. Oh, it looks like it's working this time. Okay, great.
Yep, we
Hi,
can
everyone.
hear you. Thank you. Hi folks, we're waiting a second for Jane to come on. She was sent a link a little late, so she should be on her way. We'll give it another like 30 seconds and then we'll start and she'll show up because we do have a quorum. We have a lot to cover tonight, so I want to make sure we get started. I think Adrian, let's go ahead and we welcome everybody to the April 19th meeting of the EBCE Community Advisory Committee. Could you please call roll, please, Adrian?
Yes, Member Eldridge.
Present.
Member Laundrie.
Present.
Member Pacheco. Member Pcia.
Here.
Vice Chair Frank. And Chair Sutter.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So we'll move on to item C2, which is public comment. This is open for anyone who wants to address the committee on anything related to EBCE that is not already on our agenda. Do we have, I see one hand raised. Do we have any speaker slips?
Yes, we do. Hold on 1 second. Alita Dupree is signed up.
Okay.
I am going to allow her to talk now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Mary Sutter and members. Alita Dupree, for the record, my pronouns are she and her. It's good to be back with you. Today I talk about general EBCE matters. I reiterate, I am simply an ordinary user of electricity, renewable electricity. I represent only myself, though surely some would agree with my sentiments. And as I monitor the Cal ISO power statistics, I am still dismayed about the huge amounts of curtailment that are happening throughout the state. And ask myself, how do we at EBCE grab some of that inexpensive and even negatively priced electricity So if somebody were to pay me to use some electricity, I'd be turning everything on. I'd be doing all my cooking for the week and turning up the hot water heater. I have an all electric home, so I can do some of that. Certainly, the goal is buy more electricity, buy less fossil fuel energy products. How do we make the sea change so that we don't have to use fossil fuel products in our homes and businesses? As I've talked about restaurants, running natural gas in kitchens, it's just not a good thing. I know how to cook with electricity. Believe me, I like the cleaner air in my home. Though sometimes I still have to vent out the little bit of smoke I get. Electric vehicles. I don't have a car, but I'd love to ride on an electric bus. And BART is working on more renewable electricity. I am perfectly fine with living next door to a solar power generating station. But I would not want to live downwind or even in close proximity of a coal-fired power plant. So how can we at EBCE buy more of this cheap renewable electricity and pass it on to the people? Because that's, I believe, part of how we will get our value proposition. Time of use is essential, and it's important to consider the possibility of demand pricing. That's a little more tricky because it's hard to do demand pricing unless you know what your demand is. So hopefully that will spur the creation of electronic dashboards that people can use in their home, so they can see what their volumetric and their demand usage is. Because the key to being an empowered user of electricity really boils down to awareness. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. Any
Okay.
others?
Yes, Jessica Tovar. Jessica Tovar, I am unmuting you now.
Great. And Adrian, please have the record show that Vice Chair Franck has shown up.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Jessica Tovar of East Bay Clean Power Alliance. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. It's hard to tell sometimes. So what I wanted to share with you today, East Bay Clean Power Alliance, Local Clean Energy Alliance, other members, in other spaces, other committees, we've been really advocating for East Bay Community Energy to do something to address the utility debt that folks are experiencing as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also urging the program to create an ongoing shutoff prevention program. And it's because, regardless of the pandemic, there are people who have to make decisions between groceries and paying their utility bills because they're struggling to make ends meet. One thing that we have learned is that other community choice programs have provided bill credits to their FARA customers, and even in some cases to their small business customers. We learned that Peninsula Clean Energy offered $100 of bill relief to FARA customers. Marin Clean Energy offered $10 monthly credits to FARA and $22 monthly credits to its small business. And then Clean Power SF gave a one-time $50 bill credit to its FARA customers. And one of the other things we've really been advocating for is creating a fund, like a shutoff prevention fund within East Bay Community Energy that uses EBCE money as well as customer contributions. And also fund nonprofits to facilitate more enrollment into the FARA programs, and also the LIHEAP program for folks who might need, that one-time payment to catch up their bills. And these are great discount programs, but one of the things that I think, isn't clear to us is how do folks get enrolled into the AMP program? And I've heard the staff talk about that they do that enrollment. So I would like to learn more about that. And one of the basic things we've been asking East Bay Community Energy to do is to post all these resources for people who need to sign up for these programs, because a lot of people don't know that they exist or where to go. And if there was a website on East Bay Community Energy, kind of like a tag, a banner that says, are you struggling or behind on your utilities? Check out these programs and list all of them, because a lot of people don't know about these resources, and you're able to share that information in many languages, and that would be actually really helpful to the community. So I'm really urging our program to step up and help our community who's currently struggling economic impacts from COVID-19, and that we move forward with a shutoff prevention program from here on out. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Do we have any other speakers, Adrian?
Jessica was the last speaker. We've
Okay.
no further speakers.
So let's move on to item C3, which is approval of last month's meetings, the March 15th meetings.
I move approval.
So that was Anna Olivia moved approval. Do we have a second?
Awesome. Oh, go ahead, Jane.
Jane Cronk, a second. And I have one change I would like to make in those, which is on item C4. This is the chair report. It indicated last month that Chair Sutter spoke regarding the metrics initiative, stating that a full review of the initiative is planned for the April CAC meeting. And it was just an update, and I'm going to do that. So it's not a full review. If you could change the words to say stating that an update of the initiative would be this month, then that would be in line with what I remember saying.
Thank you.
Any other changes from members of the committee? So I guess since I made this, I indicated this after we had our motion. Can we amend it to be as with my
As amended.
As amended. Thank you, Anna Olivia.
Okay.
And a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Member Eldridge?
Yes.
Member Landry?
Yes.
Member Pacheco? Member Padilla?
Yes.
Vice Chair Frank?
Yes.
Chair Sutter?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. We're moving on to, and this is last month's meeting, so let me move on to here. Item C4 is the chair report. And I've got a little bit lengthier chair report than typical because I wanted to provide everyone with an update to the initiative metrics, the metrics initiative that we've been working on. Thank you, Adrian. I was hoping you'd bring that up. This document is a short little 2-page document that is also linked on the website. It describes the background to this initiative. For those who haven't had a chance to read it, this is something that the chair and the vice chair of the CAC chose to do at the beginning. We were thinking about this at the beginning of our term last July, and we came up with this initiative. We decided that we would try and go after 3 goals. Adrian, can you make it bigger so people can read the 3 goals, the 1, 2, and 3 that are there in the middle of it?
Yes.
Thank you. And as he's doing that, we're working on these goals and doing this kind of in the background so far. There's been some information that's been brought back to the CAC, but Jane and I have been collectively working with JP on this. We've had several different meetings where we've talked about talk about various things to get to our goals. And so move it up a little bit, please, Adrian, so you can see the three goals were to document where EBC stands in terms of stage 1 efforts. It was going to be a qualitative documentation, And the second one was going to really document or work with staff so they could document and track the values ascribed to the current LDBP metrics that are noted in the local development business plan. And then lastly, to describe how the beneficial pillar principles that we have in the CAC work plan of social equity and just transition are being addressed through the activities of LDBP or outside of even the efforts that may be labeled as local development. So if you move up a little bit, I'm going to tell you kind of where we stand with this, and it bleeds into kind of one of the other things I was going to tell people. Really what we've had in discussions with JP, and as JP talked to other members of staff, is our first goal of really to document EBC in terms of the stage, the end of stage 1 for the local development business plan and moving into stage 2. It's a much broader component of really what's happening in the organization as a whole. And so we've set that aside as a goal for this. It really determined that our effort is much more targeted. So we've kind of set that goal aside and felt that some of the public workshops that are occurring now as staff brings on and brings up to date some of the new board members and CAC members is really handling that one. So the second one is document and track LDPB metrics that are already there. We had some discussion around those. I think that we've had discussions that we've brought to the CAC in the past in terms of how InPlan, which is a software package, may be used to track some of these. And JP has also talked to us in the past about using some other information in their custom relations management, their CRM, Salesforce, how they may be using some of those. So we've had some of those discussions at the CIC already, but the majority of the time that we spent here is really on this goal 3, which is thinking about how to beneficial pillar principles of social equity. And really I bulleted some of the things that we feel like we've accomplished in our meetings, and we're bringing everything back to the CAC at this point. We've worked with JP and we are continuing to have a few discussions to structure a public meeting on environmental and social justice metrics. We're expecting that to happen in the late May, early June timeline. So for people that are interested, in May, I should have a better date for that, but know that it's coming. We've talked to JP about perhaps using a facilitator for that meeting, and I think he is definitely looking into that. If you scroll up, Adrian. And keep going to the next page, yeah. So we really clarified also that JP wants to collaborate with the CAC members to increase participation in some of these frontline communities. In fact, one of the discussions that we have late today about the community solar green tariff is really looking for CAC input on how they can find the appropriate people to help really bolster this program. We also heard, we talked about various terms that are going on in the industry right now about social justice and environmental transition. Frontline communities being one of them. I think Jessica referred to that as well in a document that she sent out. There's been just a lot going on outside of EBCE. And EBCE staff, these are things that we learned, have really been paying attention to all of that and really thinking about how those can fit with EBCE and what terms they want to use. So I'm sure that that will be part of some of the discussion that may be occurring in this workshop. And the other thing we did is really talk about how one might want to group a set of metrics into kind of bigger picture things. So you can really talk functionally about 2 to 3 things that you're really going after, and these metrics are supporting it. So that's been the extent of our discussions. Nothing has been decided upon, and we're looking forward really to that public meeting as we bring things back to the broader public and as we bring things back to the CAC. So that is one portion of it. You can go ahead and close that down, Adrian, but I wanted to let people understand that that's where we are with our update. And I mentioned the public meeting that should be expected in late May or June. And then lastly, we have had some movement on the CAC member front. Whoop, whoop. We've got, for people who haven't had a chance to look at it lately, we've got 5 geographical areas that the latest policy chooses to bring people, CAC members on in terms of actual people and then alternates. Out of those 5, we've got 2 groups where the board members were able to get together enough to decide who they want to appoint and who the alternates are. And Alex is also on if there are any other questions, but at this point, you can look online to see who's been appointed, to see who the alternates are. I just wanted to let you know that that has been going on. They will be appointed on Wednesday. So folks may be listening in as the public, but we have no new people yet. We'll have new people in May, and then the other 2 areas, hopefully the directors will have had a chance to get together and figure out those, as well as our 2 open seats that are coming through a different process. So we're really pleased that that is occurring, and wanted to just to let people know that that's happening. That's the end of my report, and we've got a couple hands raised. So Cynthia and then Olivia.
Yes, I'm in the BART system, so there could be an interruption. What I wanted to ask Mary, if I know that document has been shared before, but if that document, I would like to get that document emailed to me. The one that you just pulled up, the document that you pulled up and was reading from.
Sure, that's online. It's online, but I can send it to you. And I can tell you that the original metrics initiative, that's also linked in that document.
Okay. And then you mentioned some trainings for the new folks that will be coming aboard. And if existing CAC members would like to avail themselves of, additional trainings or whatever, refresher trainings, I'd like to be informed of that. And lastly, in terms of the upcoming public meeting and or possible meeting with the CAC, can you let us know as soon as you have those dates available so that myself and others, can participate?
Absolutely. And I will say that the workshops that I alluded to are not trainings. They are workshops that staff are putting on for the new board members to kind of bring them up to speed. And those are all public. They are keeping those, they're recording those. And the onboarding package that we're putting together for the new CAC members that Alex is working with Jane and I on, those will be linked. So they have the opportunity to go look at those. And that onboarding package is something that we can offer to any CAC member. It doesn't have to be just new folks. It'll be a public document. And you can go those, and any of the future workshops are all public.
Okay, so is that being done via the computer, or I guess it's being done, or is that being done via Zoom? I mean, yeah.
I think these are all Zoom calls.
Okay, I may want to participate in those if I may.
Yeah, yes. I mean, they're public, so the CAC can participate in all of them.
Okay, I guess what I'm saying is when you have those dates, if an email or an announcement can be sent out.
All right, I'll work with staff and Adrian to figure out, because I know we've got one coming up, but I don't know exactly when it is.
Okay, yeah.
All right, I'll figure that out.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you.
Anne and Olivia.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks for that report and all the work that you all have been clearly doing with JP. That's really great. It's exciting to see these really concrete things that are coming out of this. It's exciting. I would like to volunteer for to participate in if you do end up doing a group that involves community outreach and how to reach other communities. I would love to participate in that. The last year or two, I've been vice chair of the Equity and Access Committee for the Transportation Commission, and we've been learning a lot about successful ways to achieve higher penetration into some of our target communities, and it would be great to bring that back here. And that is all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Anna Olivia. Know that we had talked about creating some sort of small group like that. We do not have official subcommittees. We can't create subcommittees, but we can have small groups of a couple people. And we were waiting to form that until after we had new folks. You know, we're waiting for some of the new CAC members to see who might be interested as well. So, but it's good to know that you're interested. Thank you. All right. I think, Anna Olivia, did you have something else or hand down? Thank you. All right. So that's it for the CAC chair report. I'm going to move us on to the C5, which is legislative positions. And last month, Melissa gave us a great discussion of legislative and regulatory positions on the legislative side. I've really asked her to provide us a bit more detail about the regulatory side and really not go through the entire legislative update again unless there's something big, because we had a really good discussion on that and presentation last month. So really hoping, Melissa, to hear on the regulatory side and then maybe not even on the legislative unless you think there's something big. This is an informational item for us folks.
Thank you. Well, so what I had prepared for this month was an update on the PCIA, because I think that's the big regulatory happening. And then I wanted to give a brief update on the positions we were recommending, new positions that the board take on the legislative side, if that works. So next slide, please. To start, just kind of a refresher on the PCIA. This is the PUC's authorized way for PG&E to recover the uneconomic procurement costs from their legacy contracts, i.e. contracts that they signed or generation that they entered into before CCA customers left their service. And for EBCE to maintain its value proposition, our generation rate plus the PCIA has to be less than the equivalent PG&E generation rate, which has the PCIA already included in it. So it's always gen rate plus PCIA is less than PG&E gen rate. So the PCIA rate, so how much customers pay, is set annually in the PG&E era proceedings at the CPUC. But then the PCIA rate design, which tells you how is the rate structured, is based on an ongoing PCIA rulemaking, which is a proceeding at the CPUC. So you'll recall back in October 2018, the PUC issued a decision. We didn't like it very much, and it implemented a new rate framework. But that implementation was ongoing because there were several phases to the proceeding. And as part of the second phase, which was supposed to deal with all the excess procurement and how to allocate that equitably, there was a working group formed called the Working Group 3. And that group, it was, multi-stakeholder parties met to basically work out a joint proposal to allocate the PCIA resources. That proposal was filed back in February at the PUC of last year. And then finally, over a year later, on the 5th of April, the PUC issued a PD on Working Group 3 that does not, unfortunately, adopt that working group proposal. Next slide, please. Okay, so I just put a little chart here together to kind of illustrate what did the working group 3 proposal do, which we liked, which we signed on to as part of CalCCA, and what does the proposed decision do? There's basically 3 different product types that we're most interested in here. That each of these are products that we buy today and that are part of our portfolio. Resource adequacy, or RA as we call it for short. In the working group 3 proposal, that RA would have been allocated proportionally to all of us who have PCIA paying customers. RA is a compliance requirement. We have to procure a certain amount of it at whatever the market price is when we go to market for it. So this would have given us our proportional share, should we choose to accept the allocation. The proposed decision does not allocate the RA. Instead, the investor and utilities like PG&E keep all the RA, including any excess. They can sell it if they want, but they don't have to allocate it to us. And if they do sell it, it's kind of on their terms, on their timeline. RPS, our Renewable Portfolio Standard, is the second product. Under the Working Group 3 proposal, again, that would be allocated proportionally. And if there's excess because LSEs don't want to take their allocation, then that gets auctioned off. Under the proposed decision, it actually does adopt an allocation proportionally, but not until 2023. But there's a couple other factors here. It prohibits a load-serving entity from reselling their allocated renewables should they need to do so for some reason. And it also allows the investor and utilities to set an auction bid floor for the excess and then keep any unsold excess. So they get to decide in advance of that auction kind of what they're willing to accept. And if they can't sell it at those prices, then they can keep it. And then the third product is greenhouse gas-free energy, which, as you know, is something EBCE has also been procuring. And the Working Group 3 proposal would allocate this proportionally again. You're probably seeing a theme here. The proposed decision allows allocations only through 2023 and defers any action after 2023. So the proposed decision says we may continue allocations, we may assign a value to greenhouse gas-free energy in the benchmark, or we may do something different. And I think that's really frustrating because a lot of the value of this proposal comes from the certainty of knowing that you're going to get an allocation. And this proposed decision does not give us that certainty. Next slide, please. So what are we doing? Well, advocacy at the moment. Before the decision is final, we have some time to do some advocacy. So CalCCA and its members, including EBCE, are developing comments and seeking ex parte meetings with the commissioner's offices. Opening comments are due on the 26th. Reply comments are due on May 3rd. And the proposed decision could be voted out as early as May 6th. Sometimes meeting or proposed decisions get held. Other times you get an alternate proposed decision, or you get some red lines to the proposed decision, and those can delay the decision as well. But the soonest that it could be voted out is May 6th. So we'll be watching that closely. And then my last little side note here is that if we're unsuccessful at getting this proposed decision changed, really our best option is continued support of SB 612, which is the Portantino bill that EBCE is supporting. And it's sponsored by CalCCA. And essentially the bill adopts the elements of the Working Group 3 proposal. So if the legislature can't kind of get it right, then we still have hope that the legislature will do the right thing with the bill. Next slide, please. So you asked me not to go too much into depth on these. These are just really updates on kind of where we're at with adopted bill positions. We've sent in a bunch of support letters, essentially. One of the bills we voted to support has been gutted and amended and has a completely different subject. So that one we're taking off our list. So the next slide is kind of the same for the Senate. We can skip that one as well. And then the slide after that is 3 new recommended bill positions. So AB 33 is a bill authored by Ting that would require the CEC to provide grants and loans to local governments to maximize energy use savings, but also to expand installation of energy storage and availability of transportation electrification infrastructure. We're doing all of those things. So the opportunity to have more grants and loans available to do those things is a positive thing. And so we're recommending a support position. AB 1239 is also authored by Ting. And this one would require the CPUC to conduct an investigation into causes of market failures regarding demand response and trying to understand better why isn't demand response able to reach its potential. Essentially what policies at the CPUC might need to change in order to enable more demand response. It also would require the CEC and CAISO to develop some initiatives to achieve all cost effectiveness demand response by 2030. Demand response is one of the tools in our toolkit to ensure that we are reducing greenhouse gases and that we are providing local resources. And so this is another bill that we think warrants a support position. And then finally, SB 589 is authored by WESO. And this bill would require the CEC to identify workforce development and training resources needed to meet the established EV charging infrastructure goals. So we think this could potentially lead to future funding opportunities for workforce development and training once those needs are assessed and identified. So again, we think that this is a positive bill that could help further our workforce development and local resource development goals. So I believe that is the last slide. Just kind of a next steps. We're continuing to do what we do this time of year, reviewing and analyzing bills and amendments, sending position letters, monitoring the bills on our watch list, determining when we should take a position, continuing to monitor the governor's budget request, since there's a sizable amount in there for zero emission vehicles, and continuing to engage with CalCCA on some ledge efforts. And then I highlighted here a couple requests to the board in terms of advocacy. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, Melissa. Adrian, do we have any public comment on this item?
Excuse me. There's no one signed up for public comment for this item.
I do see one hand raised.
Okay. I am allowing Audrey to speak now.
Great, thank you.
Thanks very much. I wanted to ask a question about the PCIA items or products. Is it, maybe I'm I'm understanding things falsely, but it seems to me that the products are expanding for the products for which all, comes under the PCIA. That area is growing, and so that's one question. It concerns what are we responsible for, and is it an increase over what we understood at the beginning of this whole process? And the second question I had was, what happened to the time frame? MCE started in 2010. We started in, I guess, 2017 officially. And what has happened to any distinctions between when memberships, when CCAs launch and, and PG&E is under full alert that we have left? So can you answer those two questions? I hope that they're clear enough.
So Melissa, I'll turn that over to you. I'll make one statement. I know that there's a vintaging portion of this PCIA. My assumption is that continues to remain in place. So vintaging, Audrey, is when a certain group go away, that's the vintage that they're in for the products that are available there, and we're responsible for those different vintages. Melissa, back to you.
Sure. So in terms of the products, they have not expanded. Essentially, PG&E has entered into generation contracts as well as developed their own generation resources. And those resources come with these different attributes. So these attributes have always been there. And now we're just trying to say, to the extent these attributes have value to us and we are paying the over market costs anyways, we should be able to access some of those valuable attributes from the portfolio that we're paying for. In terms of what you said about vintaging, that's absolutely correct. Each year when a CCA's customers depart, they are assigned a vintage by PG&E. And so at that point, the utility is on notice that they are to no longer buy for those customers. But much of the procurement that is in the PCIA happened long before we were formed.
Thank you for that. Do we have any comments? I see no raised hands from the committee. Oh, Monica. Monica, then Cynthia.
Hey, Melissa, thank you for that. I have two questions. One on the PCIA. It seems to me that the CPUC gave a lot to the IOUs and not much to the other customers, I guess the other load serving entity that represent a large share of the customers now. Do you have any sense in reading what the CPUC put out as to their thinking as to why they would basically give everything back to the IOUs, or let the IOUs retain essentially all the resources and all the value? And then second, on the legislative updates, I'm wondering, does EBCE have a position on SB 67, the Becker bill on 24 carbon-free 24/7?
Would you like me to answer?
Yes, please.
Yes.
All right.
Oh, yes.
So I'll answer the second first. We do not have a position on SB 67. I think we're still analyzing that bill. The first question that you asked about why is the PUC giving more to the IOUs? I think that the philosophy that's been adopted is IOU customers shouldn't be at risk based on the fact that customers have left. And so in essence, IOU customers bear no risk, although we all share the over market costs. And that has been a philosophy that the PUC just continues to maintain. So for example, resource adequacy is a scarce product. We all need it. There's not enough of it. The PUC doesn't want the IOUs to be short and to have the IOU customers pay more at today's market prices to procure any shortfalls. They feel that the IOU already procured for its customers and therefore it should be shielded from having to go back into market. In essence, what it really does is it means that we are paying for the risk. We are paying the hedging costs of the utilities.
Thank you. Cynthia.
I think there's a train coming by, but let me see if I can ask my question. What I want to ask Melissa, you said that in one of the slides that we cannot resell some of the energy that was offered. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
In one of, yeah.
Under the proposed decision, we would not be able to resell any renewables RPS attributes that we get from the energy. So if we were to get an allocation of RPS and for some reason say we had too much, and we wanted to sell the excess to other parties, we could not do so.
and I may be wrong on this, but how about let's say nuclear energy. Let's say that we didn't want to accept it. I don't know if this is under the same category, but we chose to sell it, which I think we're doing for this year, but not take it. Would that be prohibited in 23?
No, because that is not considered renewable. It's considered greenhouse gas free. So it's a different category.
Okay, that's
2023. We don't actually know how it's going to be treated.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee before we move on? I actually see one more public hand. We'll go back to the public, kind of a small change of pace to pick up Jim Lutz.
Okay, I am unmuting Jim Lutz now.
Thank you.
Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
My question is, given the vintages of the contracts that PG&E bought in the past, shouldn't the PCIA be declining just because it's for stuff, contracts that should be running out anyways? And so
Jim,
why is it going up?
Yeah, Jim, I'm going to let Melissa answer that too, except I will say that, yes, we all kind of wonder about that. It does seem like it should be going down, but it's not. We are bringing in more customers, but Melissa, there's more to it than that.
Sure. Many of the renewables contracts that were signed were 25-year contracts. And in fact, in the first few years, the projects were being constructed. And so there was no product yet to sell. We didn't start, or PG&E didn't start making payments until the projects reached commercial operation and started producing the renewables. And so if you have 25-year contracts that didn't start necessarily back in 2010, but started producing more like 2015, 2016, you can imagine.
Okay. Another sort of related question is, the PCIA applied to all load, and I'm thinking of expanding load with electrification for vehicles and space and water heating. Those loads weren't around when PG&E made those contracts. So the PCIA should not be applied to those type of loads.
So Melissa, I'll let you answer that, and then we're going to need to move on to our next item.
Okay, yes. I share your thoughts. We've raised this argument in the past. We've never gotten traction with it. I think it's an argument we will continue to make going forward. I think part of the difficulty is that load is always changing. You have customers moving out of the service territory and customers moving in. And so it's kind of hard to set those bright lines. But we would agree that as our load expands with electrification, that load should not be subject to PCIA.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to item C6, which is extension of the temporary revision to the terms and conditions section of failure to pay and temporary suspension to delinquent accounts and collections. Just for the CAC, this is actually, it's an informational item for us. It's on the consent calendar for the board. At the time I put it on our agenda, I hadn't realized it was going to be a consent item, which is why we ended up seeing it here. I don't think that there's a whole lot new on this. I do think it's just extending it, but it looks like Kelly is on to kind of tell us about it. So Kelly, please go ahead.
Sure thing. Well, Mary, I think you actually just captured it. We have brought this nearly identical item to the board now. Forget the exact number. It's in there. Sorry, I've listed out in April, June, October, and January. So it reads about the same as the other items. In this case, the CPUC is still, there are, plans in place thinking that this may be the final extension. However, if you look at the CPUC and their documentation, their write-up on the item, on this item, they do say with an option to extend. So I expect that we'll come back again with sort of the final version of this. But otherwise, I can answer questions. I don't want to use a lot of time though for an item that is on consent, and I think everyone is already quite familiar with.
Yeah, Kelly, can you indicate for the committee what we're extending it to? I think it's going.
Yeah, sure.
June
Yeah,
30th.
sure. This is an extension of the temporary revision of our terms and conditions, the failure to pay section. So we're suspending anything having to do with delinquency and collections. And that is being extended for an additional 70 days until June 30th, 2021.
Great, thank you. Do we have any public comments on this item?
Yes, we do. Jada is signed up to speak. I am unmuting her now.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Jada Durmaz-Logan with the Local Clean Energy Alliance. My comment is not directly about the extension, but about utility debt relief. Jessica already mentioned some of what I wanted to say, so I will be brief. I would like to just emphasize some of the things she said. First, we would like EBC to create a page listing all the debt relief programs available to ratepayers in the EBC territory and add a link to that page on EBC's homepage. Also, as Jessica already mentioned, other CCAs have been offering bill relief credits to help their customers with their utility debt. We heard that Peninsula Clean Energy's bill relief credit program was very effective because customers didn't need to submit an application. They automatically got the credit in their bills, and the program had very little administrative cost. So we hope EBC will consider offering a similar bill relief credit to its care and fair customers, specifically to those who enroll in CPUC's AMP program. A bill relief credit could help more EBC customers benefit from this statewide debt forgiveness program. And by doing that, I think it could also help EBC recover some of its debt. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other public hands. So Monica and Cynthia, your hands are up, but they never went down from the last item. Can you put them down, put them back up if you want to say something? Cynthia, I'll go ahead. Do you still have something to ask on this item?
Yes, there's a train coming by again. So what I would, I support, continuing this till June 30th, but I would like to, so I don't know if I should make a motion to do that. However, I would like also, as part of this motion, for the staff to come back, and actually, I don't even know if I want to say the staff to come back. I would like to recommend a similar bill relief credit for our EBC customers, and also to small businesses, comparable to what was offered in the Peninsula CCA. So I don't know if the staff has to go back and do some research, or I can just make a motion.
Cynthia, this is an informational item only. This is not an action item for the CAC, and essentially the things that you're asking for are outside the scope of this agenda item. So we're not going to be entertaining a motion for this, but that doesn't mean that we can't bring it back next month and talk about it as an action item for the CEC or for the CAC. Where am I at right now? Not CEC, for the CAC. So please keep that in mind. And if you'd like us to have this on our agenda next month, please bring it up at the end of the meeting and we can get it added.
Okay, can I just clarify? So what's being brought Wednesday is just the extension.
Correct.
Okay. And I will request that it be agendized at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. So I see no other hands. For this, I'm going to move us on. We are moving faster than I thought. Thank you, Kelly. The next item is an action item for us. This is the California Community Choice Financing Authority, Joint Powers Authority. And we're hoping that staff, I don't know who, is going to really talk to us about the structure and purpose of this JPA. And what I'd like to have us do is take to the board whether or not we support this formation of the JPA or if we have any reservations. Nick, are you presenting?
Yes, I will present.
Oh, okay. I'm also happy to.
Vanessa's here. Okay, great. Yes,
Yeah,
Vanessa
sorry,
will be
I was just
presenting.
camera until now.
Yep.
Well, yeah, so I'm happy to present. And Nick, if you want to add anything as
No, go for it. That's great.
Great. Well, we can move to the next slide, please. But just I think, you know, as we get started, the JPA, which will be clear here, is specific in two ways. It is specific to energy prepays, which I'll discuss here in a second, as well as to CCAs. And so the JPA, the action item in front of the CAC this evening, and that will be in front of the board on Wednesday, is about the formation of the JPA. Anything pertaining to the energy prepay transaction itself will be handled separately. So we've discussed the energy prepay transaction a number of times, and I've been involved in the calls over the last number of months, and it does take a little while to sink in. So we'll go over it again briefly here, kind of the key points. It's ultimately a prepay is a long-term financial transaction that is available to municipal utilities and other tax-exempt entities, including CCAs. And the reason you might do it and the reason we're exploring it is for meaningful power procurement cost savings opportunity. Usually in the order of about 8 to 10%, but it depends on the market. So EBCE, along with Silicon Valley Clean Energy, are pursuing, exploring a prepaid transaction with Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley was selected through an RFP last year. There are only about 5 entities that have ever done municipal prepayments, and Morgan Stanley was the top in our RFP. And ultimately, the intent of the prepay transaction is, again, these procurement savings, and you achieve that by issuing tax-exempt municipal bonds. Off balance sheet does not affect EBCE's finances, and we prepay that energy. And so that's effectively, the motive here. Prepay has historically been used since the 90s, and it's been used for natural gas by municipal entities, load-serving entities across the country, and is now being applied to energy and renewables contracts as well. And so we're in the process of looking at this with Silicon Valley. And in order to do a prepay, you need to issue municipal bonds, which requires a bond issuing conduit, or bond issuing entity. And that's what the JPA would serve to do. So can we please move to the next slide, Adrian? Thank you. So in order to issue bonds, in order to participate in the municipal bond market, we need the bond issuing conduit. That is the JPA, the California Community Choice Financing Authority, as we have proposed the name. There are some issuers for hire, as our municipal financial advisor kind of would refer to it. There are some issuers out there, but it's quite expensive. The objective around having a JPA to do it ourselves is having some more control and oversight, as well as cost reduction. It's less than half the cost to stand up the JPA, and we can limit it in ways that can keep it specific to the need of the prepays and the need of CCAs. And so the JPA, it will be along with 3CE or Central Coast Community Energy, MCE, and Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley and Monica, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you brought this to the board last week, the JPA, and they did approve. And okay, seeing nods. And so that would be the four founding members. The 4th bullet point, the CCCFA's objective. That's again what I said at the top, specific to prepays and issuing municipal bonds, so that way we can participate in a prepay transaction. The next bullet point it is also important that by entering into the JPA, EBC is not obligated to execute a prepay transaction, be it with Morgan Stanley or anyone. It's just enabling this, enabling us to be able to transact if and when we choose to do so, and the board approves that transaction. And the last point is it's ultimately a project financing entity. It's not a policy making agency. So the JPA itself, it's very unlikely that it would be involved in any policy advocacy, though there could be some specific to municipal bonds that there would be obviously an interest there. And so we would kind of take that as it comes, but it's ultimately about project financing for these prepays. Next slide, please. Thank you. So again, there are 4 founding members: EBCE, 3CE, MCE, and Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Associate members can be included as well down the line, specifically for the purpose of issuing bonds, and as approved by the founding members. Founding members will have all voting rights. Associate members can have some. And the board of directors for the JPA will have a representative from each of the 4 founding members. And associate members can have some rights as they are approved, but they must be CCAs and they must be able to purchase and sell electric energy. Obviously, those kind of have to go together. They have to do the latter in order to be a CCA. So limited to CCAs. And the board of directors will have 1 director from each of the 4 founding members, and that will either be in our case, the CEO, Nick, or an appointee of the CEO. And Howard has been leading this internally, and so it's quite a technical transaction, and so that's the reason behind having the CEO or the appointee of the CEO. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then I think this actually, yeah, this should be the last slide. Just wanted to highlight some limitations of liability. The JPA itself is not EBCE. It is not any one of the other entities. It is a JPA of the members. So as it is stood up, if and when that happens, it will be those 4 founding members. And so finances similarly, which is the most important part because it's a financing related entity, will be separate from EBC's finances. The second point, if a group, a member agency, including EBC, decides to withdraw, it just needs board approval from the board of the JPA. The third bullet point is that the JPA is going to be the counterparty to the prepay supplier. So for EBC's transaction that we're looking at, Morgan Stanley would be the prepay supplier. So the JPA and Morgan Stanley enter into agreement, and then the CCAs, so that would be EBC and Silicon Valley, also enter into an agreement, basically enabling this transaction, but that's the way in which the finances remain separated. The fourth point, the fees, you see $60,000 split between the four as opposed to the 200,000 plus for those issuers for hire. So again, cost savings opportunity here. And there will be some, ongoing administrative costs, things like an auditor, any filing fees for state reports and things like that. And those would be split across the founding members as well as it will be written in the bylaws. So that is a lot of information. Hopefully that was helpful. I also have some more background on Prepay if you find that helpful, but just to recap, the JPA here, the California Community Choice Financing Authority, is to enable CCAs to participate in energy prepays by being this municipal bond issuing agency.
Great, thank you, Vanessa. Adrian, I see one public hand. Do we have anybody else?
We have one person signed up for public comment, Alita Dupree.
Great.
I am meeting Alita Dupree now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Mary Sutter and members. Alita Dupree, for the record, she and her. I've always supported this JPA, and I think it's important to stay engaged with it. Can't claim expertise with these complicated types of transactions, but that's what folks like myself pay you to do, so thank you. I do support, and I ask your support of this JPA, because as a community and people-based local provider of energy with public transparency and the ability to speak at meetings, we are smaller than the incumbent investor-owned utilities. So in order for us to have economies of scale, as we grow our public people-oriented business, it necessitates that we partner with other organizations that share our goals and values. So hence the CCA, CCAs are a movement in the direction for affordable, clean and equitable energy for people like you and me. So anything that we can do to procure energy and storage and resource and all the things that we need to keep the lights going, especially keeping resilience in mind, resiliency, because as we get into summer, we want to make sure that the lights stay on. We have to partner with others. And congratulations on being a founding member. That's a very distinct honor to have. It shows that you've taken leadership and a willingness to be an early doer of the work rather than waiting around to see what others do. So I think that this agency should wholeheartedly and unanimously support this new JPA and enable it with the tools for us to be able to achieve our goals of providing safe, affordable, clean, and equitable energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. Adrian, I see Jim Lutz's hand.
Yes, I am unmuting Jim Lutz now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question. These sound like 30-year contracts. Is there any mechanism to avoid buying power that could be bought other places cheaper after 20 years? Maybe that's not the way they work, but a 30-year contract at a fixed price sounds like it might not be a good idea.
So Jim, I think that we can definitely talk about that. I may cut us off on some of it. I think that tonight's agenda item is not about prepay itself, but about whether or not EBCE should be informed this JPA. So I think that's what the CAC wants to say, hey, yes, do the CPA, or we have reservations about the CPA. I'm sorry, the JPA. So do you have any thoughts or comments about the actual formation of the JPA, or are your thoughts more in line with what happens after it's formed? And Adrian, I think he's muted again.
I unmuted Jim.
Okay. Just make sure the JPA, I'm sure the people organizing it have those concerns. So I think the idea is great, but concerns about implementation and making sure that it accounts for declining costs of generation. That's all. But I like the idea of a JPA. Okay,
thank you. Seeing no other hands on public, do I have any? Yes, I see Anna Olivia, and then Cynthia, your hand is up. I don't know if that's still up from last time or if you have another question. So I'm going to let Anna Olivia go first, and then Monica, and then Cynthia, if you have any questions.
Great, thanks so much. I wish I'd read this all more thoroughly before. I recognize the need for the JPA and for the appointment to it to be a technical staff person. I guess I'm concerned about kind of a trend of us getting involved with JPAs that are staffed by staff as opposed to elected officials that are part of our JPA, right? Who are responsive to constituents, and even things like when we were first looking at which companies EBCE were going to choose for our banking. There was a board vote that we would not consider people like Morgan Stanley, and who had outright supported Standing Rock and other things like that, right? There was a moral weight that we wanted to put on our decisions that were reflective of the values for the reason that we were starting EBCE. And some of those values are financial, and some of them are social, and some of them are environmental. And so we went with a local bank who could handle one set of our accounts, and an international bank who offered to pull their investments, which they did, which was cool, in the only things that we had identified as being problematic. And that, like, it would be strange to say now everybody else needs to adopt the preferences of our community in their decisions on banking. But those are the decisions that we made as an entity. And it doesn't seem like, it just seems like we would need to take a closer look at how to make sure those kinds of decisions actually got brought back to us, as opposed to, or to the board, as opposed to, hey, we did stuff and these guys are the cheapest, but actually at the beginning saying, what are the values that we want inherent in this? And I just see us moving farther away from our community accountability. And this it's not super well thought out. I will need to sit down and look at it closer, but I have a lot of flags going up around this further distancing. It makes sense to gather resources together. It makes sense to try and take advantage of some of those economies of scale and all that, but but the contract that was just mentioned is a violation of a value that our board took seriously, like enough to make our banking decisions not there. And so I guess I would like to see how it is proposed to manage those kinds of issues within the member organizations of this JPA. Yeah, I guess that's the primary part.
Okay, thank you, Anna Olivia. I want to hear from Monica, Jane, I'm sorry, Monica, Cynthia, and then Jane.
I'm not exactly sure what I can or cannot say about this on account of I'm obviously with my employer very involved in this effort, both the JPA formation and then the prepay with Morgan Stanley. I will say though, as a community advisory member and as a customer of EBCE, this is a great opportunity. This is the ability to do a prepay and take advantage of that differential in interest rates between the corporate side of the business and a municipal or a community organization like EBCE is a rare opportunity. And when we talk about 8 to 10% savings, that's a significant amount of money. When you think about how much money EBCE spends on power supply costs, you know, being able to save even 1 or 2% provides us a competitive advantage that was much needed, especially as PG&E continues to lower their generation rate and the PCIA continues to go up. So these are very, very rare opportunities, ones that should not be overlooked at all. As far as to Anna Olivia's point, and maybe Nick or Vanessa, you can answer this question, but I'm not aware of the board having taken a position that prohibits EBCE from engaging in any kind of business with a company like Morgan Stanley. I know for a fact, a lot of the CCAs do business with Morgan Stanley and other banks and other big power suppliers because we're all part of the same business and they bring products and resources to the table that are much needed by our customers in order to be able to manage our supply costs, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I may be wrong. I may not be aware of all the policies that the board has adopted. I'm certainly that would be interested in that. In terms of voting on this, I guess Nick or someone else, maybe you can give me your opinion, but I think I might have to abstain on this one.
So we don't have Inder on. So
Okay.
Nick, I'm going to ask you to think about that for a minute in terms of whether or not Monica should abstain. And I'm going to ask Cynthia, did you have any questions or comments? And if not, then I'm going to move to Jane.
Yes, I do. And I'm glad the two committee persons went before me. I do share some of the concerns that Anne Olivia raised, especially regarding Morgan Stanley. I don't know if that financial entity has been evaluated in terms of inclusion and inclusion, equity, and diversity, what their lending practices are. It does appear, as Monica stated, to be a good financial move to form this JPA. However, I am concerned about the values of the Morgan Stanley. So I would ask that further, unless it's been done already, further research be done on the lending practices of Morgan Stanley in light of just what I heard from Anne Olivia about Standing Rock. So I would be open to it, but I want to make sure that this is the right bank that represents the community's values. And, you know, I don't know if a community bank could do it, whether they would have that, lending ability, probably not. But I just want to make sure that we are banking with a bank that supports the community's diverse and equitable values in terms of inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. So Nick or Vanessa, I'm going to ask you to wait on some of those. I'd like to hear from Jane.
Okay.
And then I have a comment, and then there are a couple things that I do want you to address.
Thank you, Mary. This is a question. I'm wondering how, if at all, this would affect, currently we're putting a lot of our cash flow is going into, or our revenue is being earmarked for, or some of it is being earmarked for the reserve fund with the express purpose of, improving our credit score so we can get better interest rates on our cash flow loans. How does this impact that? Would we see an opportunity to perhaps divert more of that revenue towards LDBP? And how do you see, this 8 or 9% savings? What do you anticipate earmarking that for?
Great.
Mary, would
Thank
you like
you,
me
Jane.
to answer those questions, or do you want me to wait till the end?
I'm going to ask. I'm going to have one more question.
I don't want to forget them but if you'd like me to wait till the end, I'm happy to.
One quick one, and then I'd like to have you address them. First of all, I support a JPA. It feels like it's a good way to go about issuing bonds, municipal bonds. It sounds like there's very few folks that can do it. Also sounds like Morgan Stanley got chosen a while back, but I'll let you comment on that, Nick. My question is kind of what percent of the energy do you think might end up going through this vehicle? Do you have a sense of how much of our portfolio we might be able to include in this? Because I know you're putting in long-term agreements in other ways. Do you think this may end up being a large portion of our portfolio, or is it small?
Over time, our intention would be to put an ever-growing percentage of our energy purchasing through this because of the savings opportunities. If you think about the general estimate of a 10% savings, if you're putting $30 million a year of energy, which reflects, call it let's just say 10% of our energy is around $40 million. You put $40 million, you're saving $4 million. So $4 million savings certainly is a meaningful savings, but I think to be able to kind of create a long-term, I would say long-term competitive advantage relative to PG&E, you'd want to be kind of in that $10 to $20 million of savings range. So, you probably want to get to a 40 to 60% of your energy in the structure. Now, you don't want to do it all at once, in kind of in stock market investing, there's a theory of dollar cost averaging. So you kind of capture, it's the same thing here because you want to capture the interest rate differential. So it might be 12% savings, 8%, 7%, 13%. So you may want to, over the course of 5 years, you want to issue a bond once every 5 years, and then they actually reset every 5 years so that you're basically just capturing the averages. And so, I think one way to look at it you might want to do about 10% of your energy every year for 5 years, such that 50% of your energy over the long run is in this structure, and that's generating, kind of a eight-figure energy cost savings. To the point, you sort of made a comment. I think you're right. Morgan Stanley was approved by the board some time ago. So this JPA has no bearing on specifically whether or not Morgan Stanley would be the issuing, would be the underwriter. This is a matter of forming the Joint Powers Authority to be to be the issuing agent. So I think that's a separate question. Jane, you asked a question about the relevance of this structure to kind of our broader financial position, I believe.
And it was the reserves, how it impacts.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the way this connects to sort of our reserves, our budget, is really the relationship of cost savings and margin. So again, if you think about in this last fiscal, you know, if you're setting your, if in a fiscal year you're projecting breaking even, and then but you layer on this structure that reduces your procurement cost by say $4 million, at the end of the year, in principle, that should mean you're generating $4 million of net income as a result of this structure. That's $4 million that you could then, the board could then decide to allocate to local development, use for enhanced customer savings, allocate to reserves. I mean, really in the same way that any kinds of cost savings that we pursue give the board financial flexibility to make decisions around how those dollars are going to be allocated. This structure does that, and it does it in a persistent way. And so,
can I just like clarify just a little bit, Nick? Because I think specifically, like we've been earmarking, a portion of our revenue to go into the reserves, and it's it's come up in community discussion of that money that's diverted into reserves is money that could be going into local development. So and it seems if we go down this path of using this other financial vehicle, which is essentially providing us that credit as part of this JPA structure with the other CCAs, does that give us some flexibility to reallocate our own revenue and between and perhaps reduce the amount that we need to put into our reserves and reallocate that towards local development?
Yeah, I think in principle, it could certainly do that, right? That, if we're creating, we talk often about this concept of headroom, the differential between the EBCE rate and the PG&E rate. And if you think about our cost of energy and, then our G&A, for our overhead for just making sure that we can go and procure our energy and just sort of, there's that bucket of expense. And then you have the discount, you have local development and all these other things we want to be using resources for. As we're creating more of a differential between sort of our base resource cost and PG&E, so creating more headroom, there's more space to go and do things like local development investment, or procure more renewable energy, or lower the discount. And that's sort of a continuing discussion that we as an organization, we as a community are going to have. What I think this structure does, this prepay structure fundamentally, is that it creates a long-term competitive advantage for EBCE, which in turn creates a long-term ability to make local development investments.
Thank you.
And may I also?
Yeah, just a second.
May I also clarify?
There was one more comment and that I was hoping that you would respond to, which is whether Monica should recuse herself. And I've thought about it as well in between here. And I think I would feel more comfortable, Monica, if you did recuse yourself from this item because you're heavily involved in it for Silicon Valley. So Nick, do you feel strongly?
Yeah,
Okay.
That seems reasonable to me. I mean, I don't want to sort of.
Now, my preference, Monica, is.
I think if you feel more comfortable and Monica feels more comfortable, that seems like the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's my preference. Okay, and Olivia, please, you had.
Thank you. So just to clarify, I wasn't actually being concerned about Morgan Stanley, and I realized that it was then interpreted that way, but that wasn't my concern. It was illustrative, right? So I don't think the board made a long-standing vote to ban any bank at all. In that moment, we opted to count environmental policy and investment policy of our banking options as part of our selection criterion. And that was an important thing for us to do in that moment. What I'm wondering about is the process that staff is suggesting in the creation of this JPA, which I am for, as far as I can tell. It is an important opportunity to be able to do these things. What I'm wondering about is the process that they anticipate having in place to bring things back to the member organizations in a process that isn't just approve this contract, but getting that foundational goal guidance in what our representative brings to that JPA, because it is important, like the technical decisions, Howard should make those technical decisions. That's all there is to it. He's fantastic. And I believe that he understands the values of the organization and has been incredible. And there is an issue with agencies that have staff and boards where boards are elected and accountable really directly to the population that elects them. And necessarily staff is at least one step removed from that so that they can make decisions without political pressure. But it is also important that we have a process to make sure that those decisions, our contributions to that JPA, come back to the board to get that input. And I'm just wondering what mechanisms our staff anticipate existing in this JPA for that public accountability.
Thank you, Olivia. Nick, do you?
I would anticipate, and Vanessa, jump in with the specifics. I don't have a language in front of me right now, but my anticipation is that any issuance that EBC would pursue through this conduit JPA would first need to be approved by the East Bay Community Energy Board of Directors, and that would include, specific discussions of parameters and policies. So, this is not an entity that can say go off on its own and elect to issue a bond without an authority being granted to it by the EBC board. Vanessa, though, if you want to add any more specific governance details, please do.
Yeah, I don't have anything specifically to add to that. I'm just looking to see if the latest of the JPA is an attachment for, at least for the board meeting, in which case they'll have the details. That specific question, I don't have anything further to add than what Nick has said, but I agree with what he said.
If you don't mind, Mary, I can add one point to that as well. Having been involved also in reviewing the JPA, and having the same issue being raised in our organization, the SBCE, is that this JPA is a single purpose entity. The only thing that it can do is issue bonds for this purpose, for the prepay purpose. And so it's not being developed or formed to do anything other than that. It cannot make policies, participate in legislative regulatory issues. Its only function is to issue bonds, and that's it. And then I'm fine recusing myself. I'm fine recusing myself as well, Mary.
Thank you, Monica. Cynthia, I see your hand up. I don't know if that's left over, if you have another comment that you'd like to make and then I'm going to ask for somebody to give me a motion.
Yes, I do. I wanted to, I do have the similar concerns that Anne Olivia just raised, but I just heard from Monica that perhaps, well, anyways, I understand that this JPA will have a very limited function in terms of issuing bonds. I just want to make sure that there is a place for the community to weigh in. And I would like to, I don't know if there's language in this new entity where the community can weigh in. I mean, what is the mechanism that the community can weigh in? And secondly, I did ask a question about Morgan Stanley, but I don't know if I got a more definitive answer back. So I'd like to have Nick clarify his answer regarding Morgan Stanley. And but most of all, I want to see some language there where there is community oversight.
So Cynthia, this is Mary. I'm virtually certain this JPA does not have community oversight. We're not an oversight committee. We're an advisory committee, but anything that this JPA puts in place has to go in front of the ABCE board. If it's going in front of the EBCE board, it's going in front of the CAC. You know, it's going to come through the regular agendizing process. To me, that is the process at the CAC. If and when this passes and they choose to go forward, that's when the CAC will get involved in this. Vanessa or Nick, do you see a different process that would make sense for this JPA?
Well, this JPA is a public body, so it will also conduct all its meetings in public.
There you go.
Opportunity for public comment. So all of the opportunities for public input, same Brown Act requirements to publish agenda 72 hours ahead of time. So kind of all of that stuff is there as well, you know, to the degree that there's interest in providing public comment at the JPA meetings, there is a requirement to have those both general public comment and agenda item specific. And then certainly there's all of the opportunity to weigh in at EBCE as well.
Thank you. Hey, Cynthia, could you remind me exactly what your specific question was about Morgan Stanley, in the sense that I think Nick indicated that Morgan Stanley has been chosen by the board for this purpose, I guess, maybe not for this purpose, but can you remind me what it was that you wanted to hear from him, please?
Okay, sorry. So you're saying that Morgan Stanley has not been chosen yet? Is that what I just heard?
No, it has been chosen, right, Nick, Vanessa? It
Yes,
was chosen through an RFP process.
Correct, Morgan Stanley. This was some months ago that Morgan Stanley was.
Okay, and I guess my question is, was that looked through a lens of their lending practices?
I don't specifically recall all of the selection criteria parameters. I will say this is a very specialized service offering. And so I think we only had 3 respondents.
Okay.
Royal Bank of Canada, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley. I do believe we focused on expertise, and of those 3, Morgan Stanley was the one we felt had the best expertise.
Thank you. So CAC members, this is an action item for us that I'd like to take back to the board and let them know whether or not we as the CAC support forming the JPA or if we have reservations. So can I have a motion from somebody?
I'll put forth a motion to support the formation of this JPA.
Great. Do I have a second? I'll second then. Any other comment before we vote? Can we have a roll call vote, please, Adrian?
Yes. Member Eldridge.
Yes.
Member Landry.
Abstain.
Member Pacheco. Member Padilla.
Abstain.
Vice Chair Frank,
Yes.
Chair Sutter.
Yes.
The motion passes,
Thank you.
right?
Yep. We're going to move on to item C8. This is around the community. This is an informational item for us. Community Solar Green Tariff Community-Based Organization Engagement Plan. We're going to hear about the proposed outreach plan. This is not I think, Sam, you're going to present this. We've heard about this solar green tariff in the past. I think you presented to us. So the program itself is not new, but I think that what you're presenting today is around the engagement plan. And CAC members and public, as you listen to this, I think there's an ask that EBCE staff are having of us. So hopefully we can think about that and respond. Thank you. Go ahead. You're muted, Sam.
There we go. I have to unmute on both. All right, I haven't tried it this way before. I'm just having some connection issues. Thank you, Mary. That was a perfect introduction. Yes, we have discussed this program maybe once or twice before. That said, I do plan to include some background because it's been a while. I also wanted to just quickly maybe reintroduce myself since I haven't spoken at many of these meetings before. So just for those who don't know me, I'm Samantha Weaver. I started on the local development team at EBCE in March of this year, but I've been at EBCE for about over 2.5 years on the public policy team. So I was working on regulatory proceedings at the CPUC, including the disconnections, affordability, and community solar related proceedings. So that's sort of why I'm here partly. On a sort of more professional or personal note, I have an urban planning background, and public participation is something that's really important to me. So I think that's also maybe a good segue into this topic, which is the plan for engaging community-based organizations in the opportunity to sponsor a community solar project. Adrian, if you could go to the next slide. And as Mary said, there is an ask today of those of you listening. What I'm hoping to do here is share a draft engagement plan and an outreach list for the Community Solar Green Tariff Program. Specifically, what we're looking for here is potential project sponsors who are community-based organizations. So I'll walk through a couple slides. I've got some background on the program itself, the purpose and goals of engaging with community-based groups, the outreach strategy there, some action plans and activities, and then I'll present the list itself. And again, I'm looking for your input on these items. Go ahead, Adrian. There we go. So to reintroduce this topic, the CPUC in 2018 adopted a decision that created 2 community solar related programs, the DAC Green Tariff Program and the Community Solar Green Tariff Program. The idea behind these programs is that they promote development of renewable energy in typically underserved communities. CCAs, including EBCE, were permitted in that CPUC decision to implement their own community solar programs, which is great. I also want to highlight that last Thursday, the CPUC gave the green light to EBCE to implement this program. So we are officially ready to go, officially allowed to start implementing as of April 15th of this year. As a reminder of what these programs are, both of them allow CARE and FARA eligible customers, so low-income customers who live in disadvantaged communities, to receive 100% solar at a 20% discount. And this is through a subscription-based model. So you don't need to own a home, you don't need to have a rooftop that can support solar. The key difference between the 2 programs is that the community solar program requires a community sponsor, and it will result in a project that's within 5 miles of the community it serves. And so this community solar program is really the program I wanted to focus today's discussion on, and in particular, the requirement that there be a community sponsor of the program. If you could go to the next slide, Adrian. So the project sponsor role, again, is the focus of the discussion. what does it mean to be a project sponsor, or how do you become one? First of all, project sponsors must be a nonprofit, a local government agency, or a school. In order to receive a 20% bill discount, the sponsor must also be located in a disadvantaged community within 5 miles of the project. So in other words, the same rules that apply to the customers subscribing to the project also apply to the sponsor. There are a couple of important benefits to being a sponsor. As I mentioned, you get a 20% bill discount. You may subscribe to up to a quarter of the project's output, so potentially covering your full energy needs. And last but not least, sponsors receive funding for outreach, marketing, education, and outreach related to recruiting customers to subscribe to the community solar project. The sponsor's role is really about helping developers in the community come together. So they're working directly with the project developer. That means they're helping to identify community suggested project sites. They could be working with EBCE to conduct outreach and create interest in subscribing to the project. And then finally, they need to provide a letter of commitment. And I think I spoke about this in my previous presentation on this topic. If you missed that, I encourage you to check the appendix of this slide deck. It spells out what's required in that letter. And then finally, I want to make sure to call out that projects can have more than one sponsor. So there's sort of plenty to go around here. Can you go to the next slide, please? So again, we're here to talk about the engagement plan. What do I mean by that? Who are we engaging? Really, it's members of the public. So it's members of the CAC, residents, and community-based organizations in the effort to identify potential project sponsors for this community solar program. Why are we doing this? Well, first of all, community-based organization sponsorship is a requirement of this program. In other words, we can't sign a PPA with a project unless it has a community sponsor. And then, as I mentioned, this program also offers some really tangible benefits, we hope, to community-based organizations and the communities they serve. And so the goal of this engagement plan is to maximize participation by potential project sponsors. Can you go to the next slide, please? So how will we do this? What's the strategy to maximize participation? Well, first of all, it's to reach a broad audience. And that's, again, part of the ask today is we're planning to consult with stakeholders like yourselves to refine our outreach list and take that list and proactively reach out to organizations who we think might be interested in this opportunity. We want to make sure our information is transparent, that it's accessible. That means providing it in multiple languages, also in multiple modes of communication. That we're publishing questions and answers we receive so that everyone has access to the same set of information. And then finally, making sure that the criteria we use to ultimately select the community solar project are clear and transparent. Third, and very importantly, we're allowing sufficient time for project sponsors to commit to participating. That means we're making accommodations in our RFO timeline. You'll see on the next slide that we're allowing for at least 5 months of outreach activities. And last but not least, we're ensuring that sponsors are compensated for their work. So our implementation advice letter that I mentioned was just approved by the CPUC includes budget for work related to outreach for this program. Next slide, please. So I think this is an important slide. This shows sort of the activities that I hope we can undertake over the course of the next several months. And they kind of fall into 3 phases. So starting now, what we're doing is working on identifying stakeholders. So we're refining our outreach list so that ideally starting in May and over the summer, we can begin doing that proactive initial outreach to organizations who we think might be interested. And that's because what I don't want to happen is, for example, 6 months after we implement this program, I don't want an organization to come to us and say, wow, I really wish we had the opportunity to sponsor a project, if only we'd known. So the idea here is to try and cast a broad net and to build in time to do that. So that means over May and June, we'll be sending out fact sheets, advertising upcoming events, making sure our website is up to date, et cetera, trying to get the word out about information sessions that we'll hold in July and August that explain what it means to be a project sponsor. Later this fall, the third phase and most important phase is making sure that we as EBCE are facilitating the relationship between potential sponsors and project developers, since they're really working directly together. So the idea there is in September to hold a matchmaking event where, in a COVID-safe way, most likely virtually, potential developers and project sponsors get a chance to meet. And I can say more about that idea and why we think that'll get over some of the barriers to implementation for this program later. And then finally, making sure we've got room at the end for an additional information session or Q&A around the commitment to be a project sponsor and submitting a commitment letter. This is all sort of overlaid on top of the fact that EBCE ultimately has to issue a request for offers for community solar projects, and developers and community sponsors have to participate there. Currently, we're targeting the RFO issue date for mid-September, with responses due in November. And that's shown on the timeline here as well. If you could go to the next slide, please. So again, I mentioned that we're here to we're here in April working on refining our outreach list. The idea behind the list is we'll use this to conduct initial outreach to organizations that might be interested. We'll be sending organizations information about sponsorship, what it means, what it takes to commit, who's eligible, upcoming events where they can learn more. Right now, we're scoping the list to contain nonprofit community-based organizations, schools, and local government agencies. Those are the types of organizations that are eligible. In addition, only project sponsors geographically located in a DAC can receive the bill discount. So we're also scoping it narrowly that way as well. But I want to make that clear that if a project sponsor is located in an area that's not a DAC, they can still sponsor the project. It just means they can't receive the bill discount and they can't host the project on site. So there's some nuance to the eligibility criteria that are a little hard to communicate, and I want to make sure it comes through clearly here, and I think I'll do a better job in the future. So again, we're interested in those three types of organizations, ideally located in DACs. What I'm seeking here tonight are input on this overall plan and the outreach list that's on the next slide. And I should mention, you can also view this outreach list in map form if you click the link that's here. If you could go to the next slide, please, Adrian. Maybe I'll just say a few words about how this list was compiled. This was sort of narrowed from a list of 200 organizations that we maintain internally. It includes prior recipients of grants. It includes organizations we've worked with in regulatory proceedings and just in general. That said, it's not exhaustive or comprehensive, so I'm looking for others' ideas. Again, if you want to view this visually, there's a link to a map that I think will help. And I also recognize that, now at 8 o'clock on a Monday night may not be the best time for you to personally be brainstorming organizations we should reach out to. So I, invite you to send me an email directly, and I included my email in the prior slide. And I think that's it for this presentation. As I said, I'm open to your input, your feedback, and your ideas for organizations we should reach out to. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Samantha. The one thing I will ask you to do, maybe Adrian, is if you can click on that link that shows the map to clarify. It's not, I actually clicked on it while we were talking, the Google Sheets one. And I think, Samantha, if you can, it looks like a lot of the DAC areas are really along the bay, and they're going to be anything that's in the colored areas, I think. And then if you zoom in, then you can see if your site is in a colored space.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. That's correct. The colored spaces, so they're either dark red or yellow or orange, depending on their DAC score. Those are all considered disadvantaged communities, and they are mostly along the bay, as you said. The sort of blue dots that are there represent organizations on the list that are also in a DAC.
Okay, so we have no DAC in the eastern part of Alameda County of EBCE. It's all kind of along the western side. It looks like there's a little bit around Newark and Fremont. Okay,
That's correct.
And
Yeah,
so the
and then
organization
this is
it has to be in one of these colored areas.
an organization has to be in the colored area if they want to receive the bill discount.
Oh.
And as long as they don't plan to cite the project. So this is where it gets a little bit complicated. I think when this program was designed, the sort of vision was that, I can give you an example, it would be that a high school would sponsor the project and the high school would be located in a DAC. And the project would serve all customers within a 5-mile radius.
Okay.
So I guess to maybe make a finer point on it, the customers subscribed to the project must be in a DAC. The project itself must be in a DAC, so in one of these red or orange areas. The project sponsor, if they want the discount, need to be in a DAC as well. There is an opportunity to sponsor. If you're not in a DAC, you just can't receive the bill discount.
Okay, thank you. And I would probably point out that anything that is on Alameda is covered by AMP.
Yes, that's correct.
So Harbor Bay Island that we're showing there, we're at Oakland International Airport, that's kind of out, I'm assuming. Bay Farm Island.
Yes, yes, thank you. That's a good point. It's I'm not able to slice that part off of the census tract.
Okay. Just
There's also
and
some
one
that's
other
served by the port.
clarification.
There's some that's served by the port out there.
Okay, so anything with the port could do it if they wanted to. Okay. Thank you very much for that presentation, Samantha. So I see no hands raised on the public side. Oh, no.
There are 2 people signed up on public comment.
Okay, please unmute them.
Okay. Jada and Alita Dupree. Jada, I am allowing you to speak now.
Thanks, Adrian. Jada again with the Local Clean Energy Alliance. I would like to thank the EBC staff for making sure that our communities benefit from these programs. And your list already has some amazing organizations, and we will be happy to recommend more organizations, and you'll work together in reaching out to some of these organizations. And I have a couple of questions about the Community Solar Green Tariff program. Like, my first question is, who will own the system? Will the owner be the project sponsor or EBC or the developer or someone else? And my second question, you said there will be a 20% discount. Will it be based on their current service plan, or will they need to switch to Renewable 100? And my last question, what does EBC expect from the customers who sign up for this? So thank you.
Samantha, go ahead and answer those, please.
Yeah. So I think I already forgot the first question. It was about ownership. So that there is no requirement in the decision about ownership. So my assumption is that will be up to the developers and those building the project. Your second question was about the 20% discount. So the way that works is it's 20% off of what you would otherwise have paid. So if you were otherwise on Brilliant 100, it's 20% off of that. In most cases, it will be 20% off of your bill with the CARE-FARA discount applied. So by that I mean, if you're otherwise what you would have otherwise already paid included the CARE-FARA discount, now you're getting an even greater discount. And then, I'm sorry, your last question, I might need to clarify. You said, what do we expect from customers who participate?
Yeah.
I've unmuted Jada.
Thanks, Adrian. Actually, like you listed what you expect from this like project sponsors, but I want to make sure that will there be a contract? Like how long will it last? Just
Good question.
To learn
Yes.
more about that.
Customers are eligible to receive the discount for the life of the project. and it appears as a bill credit on their bill. So in other words, they don't need to do anything other than sign up to enroll.
And my assumption is there's a limited kilowatt hours available. So you want to get in first in line to enroll is what it probably. And then if you move and you're no longer in a DAC, you may have to drop your enrollment.
Yes, and that's correct. And there is a wait list that we're required to maintain and review monthly and verify eligibility, check whether anyone has moved. If someone moves, that means there's a spot open and we can put someone who's on the wait list on the program now.
Thank you. Adrian, can you unmute Alita, please?
Yes. Alita is unmuted now. Oh,
thank you, Chair, Mary Sutter, and members. Alita Dupree for the record, she and her. This is a good program, and I'm going to speak in a more generalized way, as I am simply a user of electricity. Certainly, this program should be a lot bigger than it is, because this is another way that we can develop renewable energy and to provide more renewable energy kilowatt hours to those that are least likely to get it and need it the most. I have lived much of my life in areas that would be considered disadvantaged, and due to higher preponderance of concreting and automobile traffic and industries, pollution of particulates tends to be higher. So as I've said before, I would be perfectly willing to live next to a solar power station. And hopefully someday that gas-fired power plant in Oakland will be closed. That's really at the heart of the type of communities that need this kind of development. So the only beef I have with this is it's not big enough. It's a start. I'd certainly want us to be able to scale this up and do more, because we can provide millions of kilowatt hours to the communities that need this the most. It's a win-win, and I hope this will only be the beginning and not the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. Adrian, I see Audrey also has her hand up. Can you unmute her?
Yes, I am unmuting Audrey now.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a great project. And actually, I did want to say I would like to participate. A couple of years ago, I started a proposal, writing a proposal to put solar plus storage on 3 Black churches in West Oakland. And it was a very interesting experience. And actually, this might be a chance to resurrect that project and see if we could do it. I noticed that on your list of organizations, the Interfaith Council was listed. 3 of those churches were in that organization, but many of the churches in affluent areas already had extensive solar panels up. Although it also included Allen Temple, which is a very active and big organization, a Black church in East Oakland. So Samantha, I will get in touch with you. I saw that you have your email address there. Just as an example of how difficult it is to do this kind of thing, you know, these 3 Black churches are located in an area that's undergoing gentrification. So a lot of the members of these churches do not reside in the neighborhood. We might think about that and how to combat something like that. But yeah, I'd love to try to help out here and see if we can, bring the benefits of clean energy to these disadvantaged communities.
Thank you, Audrey.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to go to the CAC. At this point, I see no hands up. And if I don't see any in the next second or two, minute, I'm going to move us on to our last item. Seeing none, Samantha, thank you so much. It sounds like you're going to be getting some names, and I appreciate you putting your email address on the slides so people can easily find you and reach out to you. Hopefully you'll find some good folks and some sponsors for this program. So I'm going to move us on to our last item, which are CAC member and staff announcements, including request to place item on future CAC agendas. And it looks like Cynthia has dropped out. She may be coming back, but I've already made a note that she wants to discuss a bill relief program. And we'll bring some item on that in the next meeting. Do I have any other staff or member announcements? Seeing no hands going up, I'm going to adjourn our meeting to Monday, May 17th. See you all later.
Everybody, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.